Back here with David Graeber, just said taxing the poor.
Yeah.
Okay,
Criminalizing people.
Criminalizing industrial workers of the world.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know them?
I am a wobbly, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
I haven't paid my dues recently.
The erosion of workers' rights, 0-hour contracts. Because I was just saying about the being in that conference, and they were saying something about 0-hour contracts. It's the first rung of the ladder. Someone said, "Where the fuck's the ladder?" There's no ladder.
Yeah.
I mean, the erosion of workers' rights has been one of the premises of this massive shift from public to private. You know, the movement of public money to, that through the austerity thing.
I was at a bankers meeting the other day. It was actually kind of funny. It was on my birthday, and I won't get into how I got invited to this thing. A bunch of us showed up in like leather jackets to in honor of Yanis Varoufakis, and we heard these bankers talking, and it's funny because they say, "Oh, you're paranoid. This is a conspiracy theory when you think the ruling class are trying to do all this stuff to us. It just kind of happens, But no, actually, I heard them talking to each other, and as soon as you can decode the language, you're kind of shocked by how blatant it is. So there was this guy. He was a guy who'd been in the Treasury, who'd been in the Bank of England. He was retired now, obviously a Tory, right? And he's saying, well, we need to reflect on some of the things we did wrong, but also some of the things we did right. And he said, the thing we've really accomplished over the last 30 years since Thatcher has been reform of the labor market. We've got great flexibility in the labor market now, and it's been quite successful. I mean, this has been a theme since Thatcher, and yeah, exactly.
This is how they're making. This is what they do. It's not just about smashing the unions; it's changing the whole law. Nigel Farage, he came out the other day. He wants to decriminalise being racist.
Yeah.
He wants to take discrimination, legalize discrimination.
Well, that's the way most industries work. I don't know about here actually, but in America it's like total explicit. We hire like Arabs to do this, we hire like black people to do that, we hire Mexicans to do this. I guess that's the system that he's trying to reinstate here too. And obviously you can't say you're doing it, but everybody does it. The whole system's racist in America to the core. Yeah, and that's called labor market flexibility. And that's what got me, is because he actually said this. He said, well, it would have been nice if we also could raise living standards or labor conditions, but at least we've accomplished this. And I suddenly thought about it, and I realized, wait a minute. What this guy just said, he just basically said, like, we've got more people working harder for less money. Yeah. Yeah, right there in front of the other bankers.
But that's there's been no public service wage increases, the nurses, the teachers, and you've got all these massive tax evading barons hating down on them. Do you know, they wanted to, they want to shut all the ticket barriers on the underground, Boris Johnson. They go on strike. So they want to basically get rid of everyone's job.
Yeah.
They start calling them communists.
I was seeing the other day...
Everyone on strike. But they want to lose all their jobs.
Yep. Yeah, which if there's no jobs, then
what happened in Madagascar? The lost people and the legacy of slavery. The lost people of magic and the legacy of slavery.
It was a book I wrote. Yeah, I was in Madagascar 89 to 91, and I ended up writing a book about a place called Betafu, which is a little community outside of a town called Arivunimam in Madagascar. And I kind of stumbled into it without realizing at first where I was, because essentially I was in a place where the government had disappeared, but no one wanted to talk about it. They were hoping you would figure it out. And this is really interesting to me because, all my life I'm an anarchist, right? I'm an anarchist because my father wasn't himself an anarchist, but he fought in Spain. And he fought in Spain. He was in Barcelona when it was organized on anarchist principles. And he realized that if you get rid of cops and armies and, have people self-organize, we all have this idea that, like, it'll just be chaos. Everybody will start killing each other. And, he knew it worked. What I always say about anarchism is most people don't think anarchism is a bad idea. They think it's crazy. They think, well, come on. I mean, yeah, it would be great if we got rid of cops and prisons and things like that. But people are assholes, people are obnoxious, people would all start killing each other and robbing each other, and it would be chaos. But in fact, as an anthropologist, I can say from empirical evidence, no, it's not true. I mean, I was in a place where the cops basically disappeared. They were still a police office, and they were police officers, but all they did is they kept the roads open. They wouldn't go off the paved roads, and 95% of the people lived off the paved road. So essentially, nobody's paying their taxes, police wouldn't come, cops had pulled out, but you didn't know because everybody just carried on exactly as they had before. It's not like everybody started stealing and killing. In fact, there's probably less of that than there had been before. I came back more recently, and actually the cops are back now, and everybody says crime's gone up. They think that a lot of the bandits are actually the same guys. They're like,
was it good out there in Madagascar?
It was good, yeah. I mean, you know,
sounds an amazing place.
I don't want to romanticize the situation. You know, people didn't have much in terms of material possessions. They had enough, they had good food, and they had good houses. They just didn't have much else, you know. So it was difficult, but like, people were also free. And actually, when I first got there, this is really interesting. It kind of first hits you. You get off the airplane, you're driving to the middle of the city, you usually meet somebody, and you go through the shanty towns, right? Sort of poor neighborhoods surrounding the city. And at first, your first reaction is, wow, this is like way poorer than I thought. It's kind of depressing. People are walking around with their shirts literally in shreds hanging off them, and carrying water in plastic buckets, and laundry on rocks, and and they're really poor, and so you say, wow, that's a lot worse than I thought. These people are really impoverished. And then you say, but wait a minute, why is everybody smiling? Everybody looks so cheerful. You look on the street outside, and mostly people are not smiling. They're kind of grim.
Yeah.
Yeah, and here that everybody's sort of, hi there, just walking along, happy. And he's like, okay, there's got to be a backstory here. What's going on? After about 3 or 4 months, I kind of figured it out, at least to my own satisfaction. I said, okay, all of these people are self-employed. Nobody has a boss. So they might not have much, but there's nobody giving them orders all the time.
Yeah. Beyond power, knowledge, and exploration of the relation of power, ignorance, and stupidity, which has been renamed Dead Zones of the Imagination and Violence, Bureaucracy, and Interpretive Labour. What's that about?
Oh, yeah. Well, when I first wrote that, it was sort of my annoyance with Foucault. Because I kind of came up in the academy in the 80s. I decided I would become an academic, and I don't come from a family of academics or anything like that, so it was all kind of alien territory to me. And I realized that from my outside view, that everybody was obsessed with Foucault. They were obsessed with this idea that knowledge is power, that all forms of knowledge are really forms of social power, and all forms of power are really forms of knowledge, even more. And I realized that, that's very comforting to people who have a lot of knowledge and not a lot of power. Essentially, in the 60s and even in the 70s, there was a lot of political activity going on, on campuses, and people were very much into the idea they were producing some kind of revolutionary new way of looking at the world. An actual revolution was brewing, student movements. Then that all dies down, but they still act as if there's everything they do is really politically important. So they carry on. It's like they're all heads of these vast social movements that don't really exist and arguing with each other. This idea of power knowledge was part of that. And I always wanted to talk about the way that actually power is just as much linked, not with forms of knowledge, but with forms of simple stupidity, of not understanding, not having to understand. It's like a luxury. Yeah. Luxury is what you don't have to think about. You don't have to think about when the hot water is going to run out because you're rich.
You're talking about the potheads and the hedonists.
Yeah, I'm talking about people just don't have to think about stuff.
Because people are always saying to me, do you know what I mean? How are we going to fight the system? How are we going to get back? There's loads of fucking people that have just fucked off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't want to engage.
Well, yeah, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. So what about this? So we're going to finish up. I just wanted to end on Occupy and sort of the notion of.
Yeah, the problem is it takes a while to develop some of this.
The one thing that I found about Occupy is what they were scared of the most is this philosophy that they don't want to go home. Yeah. That they've organised themselves. Like when they was down at St Paul's.
Oh, I see what you're talking about.
They had set up a library. They were feeding people.
Yeah, we did that in Zuccotti Park too.
Yeah, and they was making giving people shelter, like the squatters as well, because they've criminalised squatting. Even though some people need shelter, what they were doing was having meetings, politicising, making art. Kind of like this group called the Diggers. We had this group called the Diggers, and they just took some common land, and the big metalheads come up and said, "What the fucking hell do you think you're doing?" He said, "Oh, we're just going to organise ourselves as our own little society. We're going to have our own little laws." No, you're fucking not. And just This is what they're scared of, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's exactly like what's going on in Madagascar. There's people just fell out of the system. So they're just carrying on, living their lives, and they're actually organize themselves pretty much on democratic lines, the consensus process. This is a really exotic thing for us. But everybody's, what's the wavy hands and all this consensus stuff? It's like hippie stuff. It's like, actually, no, that's what people like farmers do in most of the world. That's what construction workers do, for that matter. Yeah, all those guys. Yeah, they do that. It's not hard. I mean, well, it is hard if you're not used to it. Just because it means actually listening to what other people have to say and trying to accommodate yourself to other people. And we're all used to the kind of social relations you have where you just kind of shut up and do what you're told, you know. But if you can't do that, if you can't call a cop, if you don't have a gun, then you got to listen to people and work something out. And throughout history, that's what people have done. You know, when they have to, anybody can do it. So we had to learn that all over again. That's what it was about. And I think that's real democracy. For me, like, when we talk about democracy, now, this country isn't a democracy. America isn't a democracy. America isn't even supposed to be a democracy. If you read the Declaration of Independence, you read the Constitution, it doesn't say anything about America being a democracy. There's a reason for that. People who actually created that system hated democracy. They said so all the time. You read the introduction speech during the Constitutional Convention. They say, well, we've got a real problem in this country. There's a real threat that democracy is going to break out. There's bits of democracy already starting to break out here and there. We need to do something about this and stop this right away. And that's why they create the Constitution. So this is a system which is basically created to hold back and stop democracy, which we've now relabeled democracy. So what's actual democracy? Well, it's people just sitting down together and solving problems in a sort of spirit of egalitarian reasonableness. Nothing that people don't know how to do if they really put their minds to it. If you got to do it, you do it. And I think the thing is that we've got this aspiration. It's a class thing, I think. I think, like, for the middle classes now, especially, they've bought into this line that the system set up to stop democracy is democracy. They're very legalistic. So their idea is democracy is a set of rules. And if you break the rules, there's a constitution, there's a legal system. If you break the rules, then you're being undemocratic. But most people who are not, you know, professional managerial classes, who are actually spend their lives building, making, taking care of people, working class people, especially, for them, what democracy means, it's like the ideal. People should be able to manage their own affairs like reasonable adults. It's being a grown-up. So it's an aspiration. We've never quite achieved it, but everybody kind of knows what it would look like. So we were trying to create it. We tried to go out and say, all right, let's create a space where we're going to do some experiments, where maybe democracy would be like this. You know, let's all sit down and try to run a kitchen. How would we do that democratically? It was a zone of experiment about what democracy would actually really be like. And I think that terrified the political classes. I think that there's nothing, actually, that scares the political classes more. The idea, in America especially, you know, democracy breaks out in America, my God. These guys panic. They just send the riot cops right away. So there's 3 months where they were just confused, you know, and there was like a small branch of the ruling class, I think, the sort of left wing of the Democratic Party, that thought, well, maybe we can co-opt these guys and sort of bring them into the system, you know, and eventually they'll, you know, give up on this silly direct democracy nonsense and, you know, join our system. As soon as they realized we were serious about it, then they're like, well, never mind. And out came the batons.
And the pepper spray.
And they threw everything they had, yeah.